For most of its journey, the water from the Derwent Valley Reservoir complex flows underground in a series of tunnels and pipes. This subterranean world is one that is rarely seen, but there are more than just waterways underfoot in the Peak District. The remains of this industry lie scattered over the hills and dales, from strange mounds and ruined buildings to open rifts and exposed strata. These are the surviving echoes of the Peak District's lead mining industry, and at one time almost every limestone dale was alive with the sounds and smells of men searching for riches from beneath the earth. In my last documentary, I explored the 4,000-year history of mining throughout the Peak District, and so I'm not going to repeat myself here. Instead, I'm going to take you to a fascinating mining complex, one that is a microcosm of the industry, and not featured in Blood, Sweat and Stone. It can be found hidden amongst the rich woodland on the slopes above Matlock Bath.
In the back of this mined open cut are 2 kilometres of passages that make up the Cumberland and Wapping mine complex. Over its length there's exceptionally high stopes, there's small 17th century levels, there's natural cave passages, and there's a complex nave of workings. Adding to that, it's been used for several hundred years and even had a royal visit when part of it was a show cave, and it makes the Cumberland and Wapping complex one of the most interesting mines that can be explored in the Peak District. Join me as we descend its depths. Entrance into the mining complex is not simple. Once you have entered the small cave, you must climb up a more modern wall before squeezing through a small passage and climbing back down the other side. The entrance was bricked up relatively recently to protect the minerals that exist in here and also protect the back colonies. Also because the mine's unfortunately quite unstable, they didn't want random people accidentally walking in and injuring themselves or even dying. The first sight you are greeted with is the collapsed timbers of the original mine level, which ran out onto the hillside. The first series of workings that we enter are the massive stopes of Wapping mine. Sometimes reaching 30 metres high, they originally started searching for lead but were enlarged in the 1920s by modern miners who were hunting for fluorspar. At the end of the first rift, a large roof collapse means you have to climb up to regain the level further on. Mines have a very strange atmosphere to them. Now deathly quiet, it's hard to imagine them filled with smoke and noise. And all around, the limestone rock imposes on the senses. Its bitter taste can be felt on the tongue, and its ancient decaying scent is not only smelled but absorbed. The tiniest trickle of water echoes around the caverns. Their acoustics heighten not only the senses, but the slightest sound. The limestone rocks are permeable, which means all the time, every day, every single month, every year, water is constantly dripping down through them. The water that falls is weakly acidic, and as it dissolves the limestone rock, it carries with it calcite. And so this is why all of these rocks here have a white sheen from the calcite that's been carried through, and the constant drip has deposited it all over the rock face. The miners knew this as flowstone. And then these small pools, the tiny little pebbles that were in there got completely coated with calcite and became known as cave pearls. The endless drip, drip will continue to lay down new rock for as long as the mine exists. Even though we've just seen lots of running water inside the cave, especially dripping down the rocks and onto my head, in fact there's very little here today in terms of flowing water. 1 million years ago, during the mid to late Pleistocene period, a massive glacial dam burst cut the Matlock Gorge, and because of that all the rivers ended up running lower. It lowered down the water table. So there's very little running water inside these caves except for that which falls as rainwater. And the week before we'd come down here was very, very wet. Beside us here are stacks of waste rock, and these are known as deads. If you're a miner and you had to make your way all the way down here, it wasn't profitable, it didn't pay, and it was knackering to have to carry out all of the rock. So if you'd already mined out the mineral from around you, you might as well pack the waste rock into the sides. Unfortunately, some of these stacked deads can be very unstable. The minerals that we have inside the Wapping mine complex were in fact a result of volcanic activity deep under the earth. There was an uprising of magma, and out of that magma went strands of mineral that solidified in small cracks, which we call veins. All throughout Wapping mine you can still see the remains of many of these minerals. Here is a face full of fluorspar with the odd trace of lead, but as you can tell it's looking very powdery because, quite sadly, even though this is a protected site, mineral collectors have come down, and instead of trying to preserve the minerals in situ, they have simply smashed away all of the amazing features. Relics from the old miners can still be found, from this laddered ore chute to now partially collapsed shafts. Watch your footsteps. Today, practically nothing is visible of the original cave system. It was cut out in the early Pleistocene, before the erosion of the Great Matlock Gorge. All of the cave system that was here has now been fully excavated by the miners over the centuries. But heading down here, into the depths below me, is a complex known as the Maze, a huge interlocking series of workings for lead, dating back several hundred years. It's very easy to get lost them as the passages wind their way in the dark catacombs. Leaving the maze, massive boulders must be negotiated in order to gain access to the higher workings. After a series of dangerous climbs, we finally enter the Duke of Cumberland's Royal Cumberland Cavern. Originally opened as a show cave in the 1800s, or possibly even earlier, it wasn't closed until the 1960s, although this section closed somewhat earlier as fluorspar mining belief in the Wapping mine displaced a lot of the rock, making it dangerous for tourists. I mentioned earlier that the original cave passages have now all but been lost, and there's clear evidence of why this is happening here. We can see vertical fracturing taking place. Within these rocks there's clay wayboards, and above us are the original bedding planes with which this sedimentary rock was laid down. What happens is that the original places of the early Pleistocene caves, the sides and the roof have collapsed in, and gradually the collapse has been rising and rising and rising, crossing bedding plains and getting higher up into the mountain. So as we go along, there is actual vertical migration of the passages higher up towards the top of the mountain. You can also find bands of toadstone, grey and brown ash laid down by ancient volcanoes. On the more modern side is the bizarre cavern of graffiti you eventually encounter. When the show cave was abandoned, the entrances were left open, and a group of bikers called the Trogs decided to occupy the mine in the 1970s. Less attractive than the minerals maybe, but a fascinating social document. The first real evidence of the show cave is a large cavern with a set of railed stairs ascending from its edge. It's hard to think that the Victorian tourists ever would have wanted to come down a place like this. When you think of Blue John Mine or Treecliff Mine and think of the wondrous stalagmites and stalagmites and examples of gemstones that they've got down there. But you have to remember it was a different time. And with the impact of people like Darwin and Lyell, people were becoming much more interested in the geological history of the Earth. The Cumberland Cavern was renamed the Royal Cumberland Cavern, after a visit on the 22nd of October 1832 by Queen, then Princess, Victoria. She visited the area again in 1844 when she was a guest of the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. Over its lifetime, hundreds of thousands of visitors would have been delighted in this underground world. The Victorians loved to label their tourist features, be it the witch's nose or the druid's idol. Any small stalagmite in which your imagination could take hold they would name. Perhaps it was to capture the public or the children's imagination. Here, inside Cumberland Cavern, they went one step further. Building this small stone wall, behind it, the dripping water constantly collects and created what they call the wishing well. Beyond the wishing well, a small cavity is the last of the workings, and with the entrance at this end of the mine totally collapsed, the long journey back begins.
It's in the evening after dark, when the black-leg miner creeps to work. With his moleskin pants and his dirty shirt, there goes the black-leg miner. Well, he grabs his duds and down he goes to you, the cove that lies below. There's not a woman in this town, no, we'll look at the black-leg miner. Oh, Delaval is a terrible place where they rub wet clay in the black-leg's face, and around the east they run a foot race to catch the black-leg miner. And in a gang near the Segel mine, across the way they stretch a line to catch the throat and to break the spine of the dirty black-leg miner. Well, he grabbed his duds and his sticks as well, and hauled him down at the dog bell. Down you go and fare thee well, you dirty black-leg miner. It's in the evening after dark when the black-leg miner creeps to work. With his moleskin pants and his dirty shirt, there goes the black-leg miner. So join the union while you may, and don't wait till your dying day. That may not be so far away. You dirty blackleg miner.
The mining sector is an industry that has faced constant change throughout its 4,000-year history in this country. The uncompromising song, The Blackleg Miner, was written in the late 19th century and depicts the determined nature of the miners for solidarity against those scabs, called blacklegs, who chose to break rank. The song is still popular today and was used to great effect during the 1984-5 miners' strike.